Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the industry, members of the civil society organizations, government representatives, our international partners, and also members of the media, I'd like to welcome you all to the official launching of the PNGEITI 2015 and 2016 fiscal year reports. Today marks yet another milestone in the short history of the PNG Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative. Since its inception in 2013, the PNGEITI has had significant milestones in its implementation, and those milestones are credited towards its partnerships with its multi-stakeholder group, particularly in the industry, in the civil society, and also in the key or the core government groups. My name is Chris, and I'll be your master of ceremony. To go through the overview of events, we will have the opening remarks by the head of secretariat, Mr. Lucas Alkan. We will also have statements by the PNGEITI multi-stakeholder group. From the industry, I would like to introduce Mr. Richard Kasman, who is the Vice President of the PNG Mining and Petroleum Chamber of Mines and Petroleum in the country. On his right, I would like to welcome also Mr. Lawrence Stevens. Mr. Lawrence Stevens is the Chairman of the Transparency International PNG. Please give them a round of applause. Without further ado, I'd like to call upon our PNGEITI National Secretariat Head of Secretariat, Mr. Lucas Alkan, who will be giving the short opening remarks, as well as give an overview of the PNGEITI 2015 and 2016 report findings. Thank you.
Okay, thank you and good morning all. Thank you for accepting our invitations, and we are happy to see that we have a good number of audiences in the room. Just trying to get the formalities, the report out to be launched, and as Chris mentioned, this is our fourth report for the year. So I will go straight into the contents of the report, just not too detailed, but cover briefly the information in there, and then and then we'll move on with the next process in the program. So I guess actually today's session is not a conference, a workshop. What I mean is any comments or queries or issues that you might like to raise when the reports are presented. We leave it at the end of the session. When you will see in the program there's a media conference section, so we'll leave it there. So it's just a official launching only. That includes when statement is made by Teresa as chair of PNGEITI multi-stakeholder group. Having said this, let's go on with the contents of the report. Some of you might have already, you are aware that we launched the first report in 2016. The multi-stakeholder group agreed to publish, when EITI was established, they agreed to release report commencing year financial year 2013. So we were able to launch, and the Prime Minister, Honorable Peter O'Neill, launched the first report in year. And since then we produced the next round of reports. The 2014, we were not able to launch because of a political situation. So environment was not conducive. So we just let it go. And this is two reports we were able to produce them in just one one round. So effectively in the 2015 report should have been released, published already, but we produced them together. But what we are going to base today is to present to you is the 2016 financial year report. And this report will be again used by the EITI International Secretariat to assess our progress in terms of EITI implementation in the country, and to determine whether we have made satisfactory progress in trying to meet some of the requirements to become a full member country. So, okay, this is the four reports, and the fourth report we produced. Over the years, the participation of reporting entities got stronger and stronger. Many more reporting entities came on board. Stakeholders in the multi-stakeholder grouping, you may be aware that we have a very strong support. This initiative is driven by the multi-stakeholder group from civil society, government, and industry. I think for the first time that we have never had this kind of dialogue in the past. And the EIT is something or a platform that was able to bring us together 3 years ago. From my side in the secretariat and my staff, we were and teaming up with civil society. We tried to bring the concept of the EITI, what it's all about. We tried to conduct outreach programs into resource impact areas, regional roadshow activities. Sometimes we ended up teaming up with CIMC to drive this message out, and it worked very well. And I think for some of you, sometimes I make a lot of some news articles in the papers, maybe just to ensure that the EITI, people become aware of what we are doing and what the purpose is and what we are trying to do here. Okay, and then conducting studies into, and the next things that we are doing is the beneficial ownership study that is being conducted now. We have an engaged consultant who's come up with a roadmap for the multi-stakeholder group, and we are implementing activities in there to make sure that some of the things that we are doing if company information. So actually, the thing was started off when the Panama Papers. So EITI International started to take this thing up to make sure that companies that are operating in the countries, we should know who's at the back, the ownership, who's the shareholder. So these are the things that EITI International has made a requirement for us to take on board as an implementing country. And we also conducting sub-national payments. For a moment, we have been concentrating on the national level of payments and transfers taking place. But all of us are aware that a lot of transactions, happens down the line, past national level to provincial, local level, and districts. Resource revenues that are being channeled down. So we need to put some light into this and see what is happening and have some accountability, transparency brought on board. So this study is being conducted, it's underway. I think it's another consultant. Assistants came from the Australian government to undertake the study. So it's taking place. Okay. Next slide. Just going on to the bit history about while waiting for minister, just let me keep you busy. So EITI implementation timeline. Just over 3 years. So as you are aware, 2013 we got a NEC decision. So EITI is actually established by NEC decision, and then we have been operating to try to get standard, global practice into the country in our resource management. PNG applied for membership in 2014 and was accepted as a candidate country. Candidate means that we need to meet certain requirements in order to be able to be recognized as a fully pledged member of this international body. Secretariat office, where me and my staff work, is still under Treasury Department. We work along with the Treasury Department, fully resourced by Treasury. I already mentioned about first report, second report. And from the first report, we got the decision out. With the recommendations that came out of the first report, we were able to, through support of the minister, the chair, at that time, took them to cabinet, and we were able to secure a cabinet decision, which is decision 91 to 2017. In trying to make sure that entities responsible for this particular activities or whatever is relevant to the function of the department or entities need to implement report recommendations. And there were 11 of them. Today, so far we can say satisfactory and done, about 8 were in the process of being implemented. So I think some positive indicator that we'll get out of for when EITA International people are here to assess our performance later or next month. Okay, 15 and 16 reports we published last year. Those ones sitting at the back, you may have got copies already last year. So, and now we're going to launch them now. And the compliance status, I mentioned to you about that. So far, so good. We have made meaningful progress. I think we have been working very hard to make sure that we just get compliance status. I think around the region, Mongolia got compliance status. They made a satisfactory progress. Recently, about 2 weeks ago, Timor-Leste also got compliance status. Philippines was the first country to get compliance status from the region. And PNG, we're positive that we'll make it, which is the validation process kicks off next month. And it will take another 8 months for the full assessment to be done. And the report will go to the EITA International Board in Oslo, Norway. And from then they will make a decision whether I will be fully recognized as a fully pledged member or not. Okay, going to the report. Next. Okay, these are the reports, the actual structure of the report. If you see the reports that at the back, the reports have been covering, the revenue streams and reporting entities. So we have about revenue reporting streams like corporate income tax, group tax, mining and petroleum tax, and all these things are being reported in these reports. And we only report on companies who are in production and actually exporting all these commodities, not exploration activities, but it's voluntary if we need to report. But otherwise, it's just a production actually taking place. And those reports, give an indication on the contribution to the extractive sector, extractive sector's contribution to the economy, and the section on the legal framework and fiscal regimes, tax arrangements, taxation legislations that govern the extractive sector activities in the country, management and distribution of revenues, how the money from resource sector gets into the budget, or maybe outside of the budget and trickles down to where it's supposed to go through the budget process with Treasury Department and down to provincial to subnational levels and all this. So we try to report and bring out some transparency, accountability on this front. And we also cover social expenditure. Social expenditures may be mandatory or mandatory or voluntary. So in terms of mandatory, for example, the project agreements the government signs up to, legal standing agreements that we are required to, or company operator or the government is required to, like MOAs, project agreements, and these are tax credit scheme arrangement may be classified as mandatory because government has guidelines and arrangements in place for companies to expand and offset against the income tax to IRC. So, and then we have voluntary, which is sporting activities sponsorship. Companies willing to put up classroom or roads or whatever in the resource impact areas at their own willingness, not required by law or some agreements. So these are voluntary, and then we cover mining industry, what the mines, mining companies operating in the country and producing, and where they are located, when they were issued licenses to operate, mine life, and all this information are contained in here. And then we have oil and gas, the same information. And then we can go to state-owned entities, SOEs like the Kumuls, MRDC, and these entities that we try to look at what is happening there. And then the final part of the report is actually reconciliation of payments made by companies to the government, and then the corresponding departments like finance, treasury, IRC need to, or national planning need to provide the data saying that these are the payments that we receive in that particular financial year, so that we engage an independent validator to actually accounting firms to reconcile those figures. But again, going back, we have a lot of gaps because, in this country, we have a lot of data duplication, outdated information out of date. Our government entities and departments do not keep proper records of what we receive. Some issues that we still need to address in those reports. If these figures are not reconciling, and then maybe double counting, maybe money went somewhere else, maybe issues for us to talk about and try to address them. Okay, findings and recommendations. Again, I mentioned earlier that reports are not just reports. These reports need to be translated into to actual reforms that matters or that matter for the country, as far as transparency, accountability, and overall governance, and then going down to trying to address corruption. All these other activities that, and as we are all aware, government has taken other initiatives that try to address corruption perception in this country, accountability, transparency, and EITA is one of those initiatives that really calls for us to take stock of those and try to address those areas. Okay, next one. Extractive industries, as you can see there, that in 2016 in the report, again, PNG is an economy that is really reliant on the extractive sector and driven by extractive. It's just not broad-based, and anything happens, we just get badly affected. So, for example, just now that we have had earthquake recently, and it's going to affect significantly on the government cash flow. And I cannot talk on behalf of Treasury, but obviously looking at adjusting the budget further to account for the figures that we factored into the projected. So again, reliance on the economy, on the extractive sector is something that PNG is a problem for a long time to come. You can see then that 28% of gross domestic product extractive sector contributed to 2016 to the overall 42% of GDP growth. So you see the significance of the mining extractive sector activities in terms of contribution to national economy and economic growth. And those graphs there, illustrations there, see 84% of exports, or over 80% of exports come from extractive sector alone. Again, see how independent we are. And that 28% comes from the extractive sector, so of GDP. So GDP growth, extractive sector again, sorry, it's only oil, gas, and mining that we are referring to here, excluding forestry and logging operations, which are not part of EITA, though countries are encouraged to include them if they want to. But for PNG's case, we are confining to oil, gas, and mining only. The government revenue contribution there you can see, and employment is just 7% as we recorded in the 2016 report. Next one. Okay, extractive industry contribution to state revenue and government revenue in 2016. You can see the graph there. LNG production is way up there. It's boosted by our exports first LNG shipment in 2014. So after our first report and then second report, you will see that bank going up. And it's around about April we exported in 2014. So after that, in 2015 full year report, you will see, and then 16 gone up. It's driven mainly by LNG export significantly. Okay, there are other mining commodities there, you can see. Okay. Again, the chart also gives an indication of industry's contribution to revenue in a pie chart. So here you can see group tax. The TITI reports, kept some group tax here. In 2016, it constituted about 34%, bigger component. Next one is, I think equity distribution. And then comes royalty payments and dividend payments. ITC is the next one, tax credit scheme, production levy, and foreign company withholding tax. Corporate income tax. So just gives an illustration of the revenues that have been coming through in 2016. That's a breakdown. Okay, next one. Revenue streams. So when talking about revenue streams, the EITA reports only the materiality threshold is 20%. I said companies in production. And we only report on anything that is significant. So in here we have a threshold of reporting 22% and above. It's a materiality threshold of the total revenue coming out from the extractive sector. So anything below 2%, we don't include. And exploration activities is one example that comes under 2%. So or MSC determined that maybe it's less than 2%. So we're not including in those reports that we've been producing so far. But it depends. Some exploration activities may be expenditure may be significant. Something that we would like to voluntarily report in the reports that we produce. So in those ones, you can see the composition and then the revenue streams that we report on. For mining, close and bonds, production levy. We cover royalty payments. On petroleum, development levy, decommissioning bonds, license fees, additional profit tax, equity distribution, share of sales, and royalty payments. So these are the streams that we cover in the report. Mining bonds are collected by consumer SIPA. SIPA is the authority. Production levy collected by MRA, so we collect data from MRA. Petroleum, we have those entities that we collect information from to report, listed on the side. Mining and petroleum, all this goes to IRC. IRC collects those information, group tax or revenues, mining and petroleum tax and ITC, and all the rest that it collects. Import tax only collected by customs, PNG customs, GST, customs and IRC, and dividend payments is collected by Treasury Department. Environmental permits, SIPA, and again, mandatory social expenditure. Again, I talked about discretionary and voluntary, discretionary and mandatory. I explained already. This is direct, sometimes goes direct to the recipients, provincial government, landowners, or all of them down the line. Okay, next one. For mining industry in 2016, we have, as you can see, the contribution, export value figures is given there. So you can see the statistics there for 2016. For gold, silver, nickel, cobalt, chromite, and copper, export values in kina terms. Okay, for oil and gas industry in PNG in 2016, oil and gas production data 2016. What we collected or reported in the report for 2016 provided in this summarized table there. So you can see, that's what I was referring to, the independent administrator tries to do. So it provides some credibility. If we're talking about EIT reports, an independent person does this work. So nobody, probably we cannot question, because we don't do it, government doesn't do it, industry or civil society. It's left to the international big accounting firms and then to the reconciliation. So as far as credibility is concerned, it's done by somebody else. So you can see there, source where it was, where oil money came from, amount reported by DPE, reported by operator, exported by operator. And then we have another column says total export value reported by operator in kina terms. And then export value reported in budget. This is treasury budget. So you see, if there are any discrepancies there, for us to see what happened. That's our back stops there, because this is what we are supposed to do, to provide this information. So, and then left to other people to see what happened. Okay, state-owned enterprises, they have come on board on the MSD grouping. So I think the Kumuls and MRDC are on board. SIBA as well. Again, state holds the right to acquire, participate in, interest in any mining and petroleum activity project at power value or sunk cost. And state in return receives a share of profits of project paid as dividends in accordance with its right as a shareholder. So during 2016, SOEs were, at that time, were Kumul Petroleum Holdings, in charge of hydrocarbon assets, Kumul Mineral Holdings, all mining assets, OTML, and MRDC. So these were the ones who were reported, were included in the report. People might say, is the data produced by EITI, are they reliable? I just mentioned that it's, yeah, we have some issues, but the issue is that, because when we collect information data from, financial data from companies, they're audited to international standards, so we have no problem. Our consultant can be able to include. They are consistent with the financial audited statements. But government entities, as we know, it's audited by Auditor General's Office. But some agencies of government and statutory bodies, maybe we have some issues with the figures, because their statements show significant shortfalls in terms of reliability of data. So it's something that is for the government to address. So this is what we bring out in EITI reporting. So such issues are addressed by respective government entities to sort these problems out. Okay, findings and recommendations. Every report we produce, we have recommendations, but a lot of recommendations were made in the first report. But 11 of them, 8 we were able to, we are taking actions on them. One of those was, sorting out license, petroleum license recording system at DPE, or now it's called Department of Petroleum. NNC has been taken away. So still they have paper records prone to disaster or fire or things like that, and need to be put on the electronic format. That's one of the recommendations that came out. Still, we're trying to sort out. The other thing is collecting data from companies is again voluntary. We are operating under NEC decision, or cabinet decision. So it's voluntary arrangement where a multi-stakeholder group come in to implement this EITI, and we try to one of the things that we were able to take action on was Treasury amended the Income Tax Act together with IRC for this year's budget when it went to Parliament last year, November. So the secrecy provision in the Income Tax Act was amended to enable us to collect data from companies, which was not the case in the first place because we had to use a waiver letter, tax waiver letter for companies to authorize IRC to disclose tax information. But for this time around, we are working on 2017 financial report. We are going to use the amended Income Tax Act to collect those information, financial information. So again, another recommendation talks about Treasury becoming more transparent in terms of the budget process. So it's not up on the website. A lot of issues, people don't know what is happening, where the money is, how is the budget done during the process. So again, some of the issues that recommendations came out from the first report, but actually the first report, the second subsequent reports try to provide some update. As you may see in the report, at the back it provides some update on what actions we have taken, what the activities or actions are in the pipeline, and this kind of things. And again, 2016 report, we have come up with some on the consultant, the independent administrator who did the report, came up with about 8 additional recommendations for us to include. So as you can see on the board there, for 2016 report, we have reconciliation differences and EIT reporting process. So still we have problem with reconciliation, reconciling figures. In the table, you will see some of the revenue streams can be reconciled easily. Some are left open because we cannot be able to reconcile. Companies stated that when they filled out the reporting template that they paid this amount in that year, but from our government side, we have no way of verifying or saying that yes, we received this amount in that year. So there are discrepancies, and maybe other factors come into play here. The way we keep our records, the way by departments and agencies that collecting those revenues, that we need to try and address the systems and process and data recording and keeping to enable us to provide more credible information so that we can access those information, so that we can, this kind of reports will be more valuable, as value in it in when we reconcile. So something that we will be working through. And then material revenue streams to include group. In the previous reports, we never include group tax, significant component that has been left out. And in this report, we are required to include group tax. So we are going to work in the next report to include group tax as of 2017 report. And then engagement with government and stakeholders to increase EIT participation. Yeah, I think we have done so far so good, but we need to do more. A bit of more, engagement need to come in for EIT implementation. Actually, to take action on some of the things to reform to systems and process and policy and legislative reforms, so that it's again going back to the EIT principle. The idea is to translate those reports into reforms. If we produce reports after reports and no action is being taken to address some issues that we are facing in the sector, then there's really no point in producing those reports. But again, I am happy to say that at least we made a start. And these reports are building up our foundation to start narrowing down on some of the gaps that we have identified. As we work through, we'll try to be able to address those issues over time. Reporting of sub-national payments under consideration. Again, I mentioned to you earlier that sub-national payment study is being done, scoping study is being done. Some of you will come across our consultant asking for consultation with you to provide some information on those as part of the study. So it's going to take about another 8 months until we have the scoping study at the end of this year, and then we'll go back to the multi-stakeholder group to determine whether we need to extend EITI implementation to sub-national level or not. And again, all of us know the problems, the challenges we face. If we are not sorting out problems at the national level, then in one step going down is another problem, issue you can imagine. Increased clarity and reporting of quasi-fiscal expenditure. So again, we found it typical with our SOEs that a lot of there are some cases of quasi-fiscal expenditure or expenditures that are taking place outside of the budget process. This shouldn't be the case. Everything should come to the national budget, and government implementation of policy and for service delivery should take place at that level through the normal budget process. But there are instances where some quasi-fiscal expenditures taking place. So we are working with those entities to try to address those problems and to take stock of those, and then give you some the picture in the next report. Increasing transparency of infrastructure and tax credit scheme. So again, the ITC original idea was it happened some years back where, with the Pongera mine and the Kutubu oil production. So the island cyber issue. When the landslide took place, the entire island cyber was cut off. So you can imagine the government procurement process takes 2 to 3 months before you engage a contractor to clear the landslide. So original idea was for this purpose, and the government that formal arrangement were guidelines that were administered by National Planning, IRC, and Treasury to operate the scheme. Along the way, it became something else. So, and it intended for impact areas, project impact areas, but where companies expand and use the credits to offset against tax revenue paid to IRC, to the government. So along the way, and all of us are aware that recently the government decided to put a stop to it and for it to be reviewed, which was also one of the recommendations in this report, EITI report 2016. We said a lot of activities taking place in this area where there's no transparency, accountability. I cannot talk on behalf of Treasury, but my previous working with Treasury as a fiscal policy person, I had a hard time trying to quantify in the budget books what is happening through the ITC. And this is still opaque. It's something that we were not able to quantify. And I think it came to a stage where it's very bad government policy to maybe not bad, but it's a good intention, but the way we have been doing it is not serving purpose. So I think about time need to be reviewed and done properly so that we can bring up some accountability, transparency into this component of expenditure that is taking place. Okay, DP to establish criteria for transfer of oil and gas licenses. I mentioned to you earlier. There are criteria there, but when we were doing EITI reports, I've been doing for the last four reports, we still cannot see what the criteria are to our oil and gas licenses. So something that we want to bring it into this report. Okay, MSD to provide more clarity on definition of social expenditure. I said social expenditure is voluntary and mandatory. I explained already. So, but PNG's definition, we think the EITI international definition, but then we narrow it down to PNG's definition of the way we do things here. So we need to, MSD members need to define properly on this expenditure. So having said this, again, international initiatives such as the EITI is one of the activities that government sign up to as part of the actions to address transparency, accountability, and corruption issues in this country. But again, not what we're trying to do, not to fulfill the international obligation as a government, but what matters is to use these reports to see what came out of those reports, to the systems and process and the weakness, and then try to recommend reforms so that we can be able to address the issues in the sector for better management, for investors, to make it transparent so that investments can take place for the public, for the government, for the good of everybody. So I think that's about it I wanted to highlight in the report. You have the detailed reports at the back. I think you collected copies already, but you can refer to for further information. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'd like to also welcome our two representatives from the PNGEITI multi-stakeholder group, Mr. Richard Kasman from the industry and Mr. Lawrence Stevens from the CSO. They will be giving their statements in line with the PNGEITI or from the PNGEITI 2015 and 2016 reports, and also to add on to the significance of this event. The report themselves also provide the platform for dialogue, especially in the different sectors. And mainly it builds on the two principles or the two objectives of the EITI International, and that's basically to look at transparency and accountability of revenues, especially coming from the extractive sector. Now, PNG is, on that note, PNG has achieved some level of reporting, especially in terms of the EITI, or in accordance with the EITI standards. And as presented by the head of secretariat, we are achieving progress, especially in terms of gaining more accountability, more transparency of those revenues, and especially in terms of the reconciliation or the process towards the assurance process of the reports themselves. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome now Mr. Richard Kasman, who will be giving his statement on behalf of the industry. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Master of Ceremonies. So, firstly, before I start, apologies from the President of the Chamber of Mines and Petroleum, Mr. Gary Alpi. He's traveling, and I'm privileged to stand in his stead here today. So, Mr. Lucas Alkan, our Executive Director, members of the MSG, distinguished guests, I'd like to congratulate the Secretariat for the completion of the 2 years, 2015 and 2016 EITI reports. This is significant as we move towards validation as a candidate, from candidate country to a full member. And if we're successful, and we need to remain positive about that, this will be quite an achievement for our country and something we should be very, very proud of. It's important also to note that there is this validation process. Even when we become a full member, if we don't continue to provide our reports to a level that is required, then we can lose our membership. And I think this is very important for us to understand at the onset. Once you get membership, doesn't mean you've got membership in perpetuity. So it's important to note that. The Chamber would also like to express our thanks to the independent administrator, Ernst & Young, and for delivering a comprehensive report on schedule. The Chamber welcomes considerable progress made since the initial 2013 EIT country report. And as the independent administrator has observed, the stage improvement in the completeness and accuracy of the data provided by stakeholders. So can we just give Ernst & Young a round of applause at this point? I think, Executive Director, there's a lot to celebrate, and for us to take the opportunity to recognize the progress that Papua New Guinea has made towards this. And I think you made a point about also celebrating the tripartite relationship and the opportunity for dialogue. And it's important that we, all of us in the room, encourage that dialogue. There's going to be times when there'll be disagreements, and that's healthy, and we need to work through that. So we really welcome that initiative, and it's something that, from the Chamber's perspective, we hold very, very highly. We do, however, draw our attention to recommendations contained in both reports, the 2015 and 2016, that show there's still some significant issues that need to be addressed in relation to adequate and timely reporting, in particular by some government entities. We urge the relevant regulators to take heed of these recommendations and reach out to the EITI Secretariat and this tripartite to assist find ways forward. We don't want the regulators to feel ostracized or distanced from this. We need the regulators to benefit from this tripartite relationship and find ways forward, because it is significant for our country. The independent administrators also noticed some differences in values reported in budget documents compared to values reported through the EITI validation process. And our Executive Director, in his quite comprehensive remarks, has highlighted those again, and we just want to bring attention to that as well. The recommendations relating to the Mining and Petroleum Ministry, included in the report, align with the challenges that we as a Chamber face when we seek to collate information and data from government and our regulators for the benefit of individual companies, and then also for publication, for public use. Executive Director, some of these mirror the Chamber's experience very, very closely. And it's important that, for example, around the definition of social expenditure, there is more certainty and clarity in this area, and we support that endeavour to do so. In relation to some of the other recommendations in the report, I would like to make a few comments of particular importance that is relevant to our industry. Number one, subnational payments. I think it was a rather courageous initiative on behalf of the MSG. And whilst we recognise the challenges, the Chamber applauds the progress being made towards including subnational resource payments in the EITI process, as there is no information in the public arena on benefits paid to provincial and local level governments and landowner groups, even though some of these benefits are quite substantial. We believe that the move towards ensuring, for example, the MOAs are made public will support this endeavour. We believe in principle. And in particular, it will provide information on gross royalty and equity benefit distribution to subnational groups, and at the least, some percentages is going to be very, very important. Detailed information on actual amounts paid to recipients will come from a variety of sources, including MRDC, MRA, and our provincial governments and our landowner groups. So this is where a fantastic initiative, but we need to be all really, really work together. And Executive Director, one of the fears we have, for example, is as we set that bar and we don't comply with that bar, this will reflect heavily in our report and will concern us in terms of validation after we publish our reports. Having said that, we totally support that, and the industry stands to support wherever we can in that regard. The other aspect of recommendation, projects in development stage. Once again, as you pointed out, and has been pointed out in the report, there are significant taxes paid there, but I think we should have some more robust discussions in that, so we don't skewer what's important. It's not a matter of lack of transparency. It's a matter of ensuring that what we as a nation, as a country, EIT member, agree to evaluate ourselves, we can be successful and it be meaningful. You mentioned the infrastructure tax credit schemes, Executive Director. And in relation to that, we note that the EITI report has highlighted ongoing issues and that government has announced that the scheme would be put on hold, as you mentioned. And there's a pending review process. We're anxious to understand the terms and scope of that review process. However, having said that, we support the review. I think it's important to tidy up the administration, as you've highlighted, and also, enhance the integrity of the scheme and the reconciliation process. This needs to be improved. Having said that, we'd like to stress the value of the scheme. May I just pause as our Deputy Prime Minister and Minister comes in?
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like all of us to join in welcoming the Deputy Prime Minister and the Chair of the PNGEITI, Charles Abel, and Minister for Commerce and Industry. Minister, if I could welcome you up to this stage.
Thank you, Minister. We've progressed with the agenda. So, as I was saying, in relation to the tax credit scheme, this is a good initiative. So, from the Chamber's perspective, we're anxious that the review process, which we agree is necessary, is done expeditiously, so that this moratorium on tax credits is not prolonged unduly. We from the Chamber's perspective, have found it to be quite useful and important. So, Chairman and Deputy Prime Minister, from our perspective, we're encouraging that this be done expeditiously. As a final point, the Chamber would like to place on record our concern with the recent passing of the MRA Bill 2017, so that all members of the MSG clearly understand our position and its relevance towards EITI. The MRA Bill, which is a revamp of the MRA Act 2005, we're concerned about the functional welfare of the MRA itself, and we believe it will greatly impact on its capacity to administer and regulate the mining industry. We're concerned about the increase in the levy from 0.25 on productivity to 0.5, when indeed the MRA continues to collect healthy revenue in that regard. And we're concerned the ongoing transparency and engagement of critical stakeholders has been the cornerstone of the success of the MRA to date. And we feel very strongly that this potentially will be compromised with recent legislation changes. The changes to the MRA are also very important for us as we look at the future part of the Department of Petroleum. The industry has worked closely with the government on trying to enhance the resources and capacity of the Department of Petroleum. This is an issue that's been raised in consecutive reports. The government has, in principle, committed to moving the department to a authority, and once again the Chamber supports that. But I want to just take the opportunity now to express that we would be concerned if it follows the revamped MRA. I think we have encouraged as an industry that the government support what was under the 2005 MRA Act. I think that was a good formula. So we're very prepared as an industry to engage with government in this. I think it strikes very close to the issue of transparency and therefore relevant to this forum. So, Minister, sadly, you were absent when I made a lot more congratulatory notes and expressed the industry's support and congratulations to the Secretariat, because we look at this very, very positively. Wearing my previously EITI PNG hat and also through the Chamber, this is something that we've been advocating since 1997 from Transparency International's perspective. And to stand here to see that Papua New Guinea has now successfully published reports for 2013, 2014, 2015, and now 2016. For those of us that have been in this journey for over 20 years, this is really tremendous cause for celebration and tremendous gratitude to the government for making that commitment and continuing to support the commitment. Chairman, Minister for Treasury, and our Deputy Prime Minister, it leaves me to say thank you very, very much, and we wish EITI well as we advance towards validation to full membership. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please once again, let's give us a round of applause to the Vice President of the PNG Chamber of Mines and Petroleum, Mr. Richard Kasman. We'd like to acknowledge the presence of our Deputy Prime Minister, Charles Abel, Honorable Charles Abel, and also the Minister for Trade and Commerce and Trade, Mr. Wei Mori, MP. Please let us welcome them. Our next speaker is the Chairman of the Transparency International PNG, Mr. Lawrence Stephen. He will be giving us his statement on behalf of the CSO representative or the civil society representation on the PNG MSG. Thank you.
Chris, Master of Ceremonies, thank you. Deputy Prime Minister, and in your capacity as Treasurer, Chairman of the PNG Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, Honourable Charles Abel, Minister Wei Mori, the Head of the National Secretariat, Lucas Alkan, colleagues from the multi-stakeholder group, development partners, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you all. I'm here as Chairman of Transparency International, as Richard pointed out, and Richard, after all, is a founding member of Transparency International Papua New Guinea. We're an organisation that's had an interest in the extractive industries ever since we started. And we started an involvement way back on publish what you pay. The idea being to make public the revenue sources that were coming to government. And that moved on and has become the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative. And as Richard said, we're proud of our involvement with it and committed to continuing to be involved with it. Again, the 2015 and 2016 reports, and our pride with the fact that we have now 4 reports to speak about. As you're all aware, there are 51 EITI implementing countries around the world. And if Papua New Guinea is accepted as being compliant, that's compliant with the international requirements, we will be the only Pacific Island country on that list. It's been very challenging, and as you listen to Lucas, who actually makes a very polite presentation of the challenges, It has been a very challenging project, and not just in Papua New Guinea. It's clearly been challenging in the other countries that are involved too. But we got the reports finalised. They came through, we have them, and now we have the next two in front of us. And those reports have a pile of information that we need to be aware of, we need to take note of, and as unfortunately has been our experience with other reports, we need to make sure we do something about the recommendations that are there. Even if we consider the recommendations and say we'll do nothing about that, at least that is a valid decision. But we don't just let them sit on a shelf somewhere for years to come. Civil society organisations are also encouraged by the Deputy Prime Minister's words, telling us to take steps towards implementing the enabling legislation of the Sovereign Wealth Fund. It appears government, civil society and the industry are interested and prepared to push ahead with this, and we're encouraged by the government saying that it will. We have noticed that despite, and we've noticed it with appreciation, despite successive changes of Treasurer since 2013, it's worth noting that the focus on EITI has been consistent, and we take courage in the leadership shown this time by the Deputy Prime Minister as Treasurer. And we hope this continues well into the future, no matter who sits in the Treasurer's office. As civil society, we offer to participate as partners in awareness programs around PNG. One of the things about these initiatives, and I address this to Alkan, is that we go back over many, many years now of an ideal of the involvement of civil society, industry, the community generally, and government officials in advancing the interests of Papua New Guinea. And way back at the time of the drafting of the Constitution, this was an important part of what happened. And it's been great to be part, more recently, with the EITI, in an ongoing process which continues to show that commitment, that PNG, if you like, belief that all sectors need to be involved in decisions which affect the future of the people. Today, and you're going to keep hearing this, Alkan, but we acknowledge the tremendous work done under the leadership of Lucas and his team. And we've already congratulated them. Thanks again to Ernst & Young for compiling the reports before us. We also acknowledge the Institute of National Affairs, CIMC, Business Against Corruption Alliance, PNG Mine Watch, Eco-Forestry Forum, and the PNG Resource Governance Coalition, each of which are civil society organisation voices within TIPNG and the PNG EITI MSG. Richard, we acknowledge the leadership of the PNG Chamber of Mines and Petroleum, its board and members, and the wider extractive industry. We especially thank organisations such as JICA, World Bank, the Australian Government through the Pacific Governance Leadership Precinct, and other friends of Papua New Guinea that have played a role in supporting our EITI efforts. It is always encouraging to see that other countries can understand the struggles that we're having, other organisations around can understand the struggles that we're having, see them that as not just a PNG issue, and be prepared to give the assistance that we need as we make the changes that we must make. We should also caution ourselves in looking at these results. EITI is not the silver bullet. It does not stand on its own. It's not an end in itself. It must work in tandem with other systems of government, business and communities that exist or are to be enacted. As an example, TIPNG has leveraged the PNGEITI process. These acronyms, but the words are far too many to pronounce, to deliver to you each time. We've leveraged this program, this initiative, for our own country report on strengthening mining licenses, strengthening the application process involved in mining licenses. We've identified issues facing that, and we've made a publication available for the community on that. There are key steps that need to be supported by all parties, including the sub-national scoping study and the beneficial ownership mapping exercise. I'd like to repeat, beneficial ownership mapping exercise, something which is very important to the whole concept of transparency. This work will be complemented with drafting of a PNGEITI policy framework, and they're all components that will be measured to ensure compliance with the global EITI standard. You've got the reports in front of you. If you look at the section in the 2015 and 2016 reports on progress on recommendations, you'll see how much still needs to be done. And it is worth noting, often and regularly, it needs to be noted each time we gather that there are many things that need to be done. And here I point out that there are organisations that are government responsibility that appear not to have been able to provide the information that should be available to the people of Papua New Guinea. And these organisations need to be brought to heel, if you like. Alkan also pointed out the tasks for government. I always say these are tasks for ourselves. We, after all, are the beneficiaries of government. We, after all, are those who are responsible for ensuring we're properly governed. We have a responsibility there as well. And we need to hold accountable those organisations that have yet to comply in providing the information that is essential to a real extractive industry transparency initiative. EITI tells us a story, but it's incomplete on its own. And I repeat, we need to act on the recommendations. I keep referring to civil society and reminding myself that in my civil society role I need to be civil. I tend to be accused of being very critical. Civil society is generally behaving in a very polite manner, encouraging change. TIPNG tries to be polite, but on occasions we're accused of being rather impolite. We, however, as representatives of civil society, know that it is through measures like this, through active involvement like this, through a commitment which a government has shown in supporting and providing a secretariat which has been able to produce this work, we can bring about change. So we encourage the secretariat to be part of making sure the information is out there for us all. It should be available actually in school libraries, in the universities, in the schools around the country. It should be available for people with these very good, brief explanations that you give, so that we can be sure that the whole community is able to be participating in what we're trying to do here. I thank you again, Minister, for your commitment and involvement, and I thank you again, Lucas Alkan, for your incredible devotion to this task and the incredible diplomacy with which you speak of the challenges you're faced, and with great gratitude for the results that we've received and admiration for the work being done by those of you who have been involved in this almost on a weekly basis for a long time. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, to the Chair of the PNG Transparency International, Mr. Lawrence Stevens. Thank you for your inspired words of inspiration and encouragement to the National Secretariat. I would like to call upon our keynote speaker, Deputy Prime Minister, and also Chair of the PNGEITI, Honorable Charles Abel. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to our Master of Ceremonies, and good day, everyone. Good morning. Once again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but my apologies for being a little bit late this morning. And I regret missing the presentation by Lucas as well, the overheads, but I won't make him do it again. But no doubt he'll give me a hard copy of that, and we'll benefit from that knowledge. But thank you, everyone, for being here today. Busy people, once again, and I hope there's lunch provided later to reward you all somewhat. But otherwise, you'll be rewarded because of the magnificent and significant event today as we collectively progress this very important initiative and agenda amongst a series of initiatives, whom I see, again, very familiar faces, as we progress this openness dialogue, trying to be as open as possible with public finances and the budgetary process and the development agenda and process in partnership with all of you very important people. But I want to acknowledge my brother Minister, Honourable Wera Mori, Minister for Commerce and Industry, and thank him for his time this morning. We both spent a bit of time together going down to the Insurance Commission, again, part of the effort of making sure that there's scrutiny over and oversight over all government agencies, because each of them are supposed to play an important role in terms of governance and particularly private sector support, I guess, in the case of the Insurance Commission, and the very important engagement and understanding collaboration with our Minister through Commerce and Industry, because as I keep saying, industry, business, private sector is the driver of growth, and it's underscored again today in terms of this particular engagement with the resource sector in particular. And I've always underscored that it's about a partnership, and we here at government must keep that in mind, whether you're the Insurance Commission or the IRC or Customs, that it's indeed, we're meant to facilitate and support and foster growth, investment and development. When government makes some of our changes as well, we need to keep that in mind very much, and we need to remind ourselves of that. But I want to acknowledge everyone else that is here, the other senior people from the government. IRC Commissioner Betty Palazzo is here, Hora Sube from National Economic and Fiscal Commission, any of the other members of the government that are here, and then of course our important civil society partners, led by some of the gentlemen up here, particularly Laurie Stevens from the Transparency International. Thank you so much, Laurie, always for your dedication, commitment as well. You put in a lot of time and effort into civil society and this effort, particularly through TI, but through the other initiatives that you support. People like Paul Barker from the INA as well, is always ever present. Even when there's empty chairs, you know that Paul generally will be filling one of those chairs, and we really appreciate that. Other members of civil society and organisations that are here, and of course the important private sector partners who are the resource companies that are here, and it's really good to see Andrew Barry is here, Robert Icey from Exxon, and I presume and hope that some of the other companies are represented here. My sincere apologies if I don't mention you, but Patricia Vivas-Carter from the World Bank as well, thank you so much, the country lead, and also the gentlemen from JICA who have provided important support to our Secretariat. We really appreciate that. Members of the media, and of course I see KPMG shirt there, but of course I know Ernst & Young, the independent supervisor of the process, so we acknowledge them. And also, of course, I want to thank Lucas Alkan and his Secretariat, who within Treasury provide that very important role, and I concur with what Laurie is saying in terms of the commitment and dedication that Lucas has shown to the cause over the years. It's not easy sometimes when you're one amongst many priorities in departments like Treasury and within the government, and you need to be vigilant in your efforts and your cause, and you have indeed been so. So Lucas, I thank you, and I ask all of us to give him a round of applause, because he's been pushing and bringing these reports to me and doing his very best. So Lucas, you keep up the good work, and of course we all congratulate you and the team through the multi-stakeholder group that has got us this far to 2016. And I will read through the statement that you have prepared for me, much as I don't like reading statements. I think for the benefit of particularly the media and the public, obviously, we want to continue to make very clear what this initiative is all about. And sometimes it is not clear. We who are part of the process or in the MSG or within the industry obviously have that insight, and we know what's going on, but sometimes we need to remind the public through our media, our good media, what these things are all about. And we try and keep it as simple as possible, because it is a very important process. But in my rambling way as I do, I just also, before I forget, obviously there's been a disaster, and I've said it at every of my speeches, that we continue to remember and think about the victims of the recent earthquake, of which we're still getting the numbers, but it's obviously a serious occurrence, and the social impact is huge. And through our Prime Minister and all the various development partners that are contributing to the relief effort, including Oil Search, Exxon, Mobil, Octedi, and of course the Australian government and New Zealand government and everyone else that is contributing, we continue to say thank you so much. I think it's ramped up in quite a significant response effort, and it's wonderful to see, but it's an ongoing effort. Again, obviously there's an impact on the resource companies in the area, and subsequently there'll be an economic impact, and this is where we've been having a dialogue as well with our partners just to ascertain that, whether we like it or not. It all comes back to revenue and to budgetary implications, which flow on through everything else in terms of economic and social programs. So it's happened. It's disappointing, particularly as Andrew explains to us, that there were some significant benefits to flow on this year relating to the improved oil and gas prices, and combined with some of the other initiatives government is taking, there was quite a positive plus side coming into 2018. And it seems we've been struck again in a similar manner we were struck once production began from the PNG LNG project in May 2014, and immediately thereafter the oil price collapsed. It would seem as the oil price recovers, we get hit with an earthquake, which is very particular to the development location. So that's the nature of the game. That's the nature of this part of the world. You got the pluses of the wonderful resources, and you got the I suppose some of the negatives in terms of the geological makeup of this part of the world, which can lead to these sorts of events, seismic events, volcanic events. And then we got weather events that, like the El Nino, that also impacted upon us. But our thoughts and prayers are with the families and communities that have been affected, obviously. So, ladies and gentlemen, The EITI, Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, is obviously a global standard that strives to promote transparency and accountability in the use of revenues from the oil, gas and mining sectors. The standard is being implemented globally by 52 countries rich in mineral resources, including Papua New Guinea. The intent of the initiative is to ensure stakeholders, including landowners and investors, have access to factual data and other contextual information about the extractive industry. This is to ensure they're able to engage in an open dialogue and make informed decisions regarding the management of this resource wealth. I want to acknowledge particularly our Prime Minister, Honourable Peter O'Neill, because he initially made the move in 2013 in supporting of the former Treasurer for Papua New Guinea to join the global EITI family. And in accordance with the EIT standard and rules, we of course are required to produce annual country reports in a timely manner and have so far, as discussed, produced 4 reports to date. These reports contain factual data from relevant government agencies and companies and other contextual information on the extractive sector. The production of these reports is a culmination of sustained efforts and collaboration between the government, industry, companies and civil society. It is encouraging to see that we've embarked on a process that is continuing to provide a comprehensive and informative picture of the extractive sector, its contribution to the national economy, and how we have been managing revenue flows from resource extraction. Now that particular point is very important. Let's scrutinise and examine the resource revenue flows, but let's also question the utilisation of those flows once it comes into our hands in terms of the effective and best utilisation and transparent utilisation of those resources through the budgetary process or otherwise. As I've been explaining, one of our concerns is the fact that significant amounts of our revenue are not necessarily being channeled into the central budgetary process, but because of various means and structures, some and quite a significant amount of that revenue potentially spent outside of the budgetary process. And that's another conversation we've been having. However, a critical challenge encountered in putting together these reports has been, as Laurie mentions, the significant information and data gaps, weaknesses in the systems and processes of data storage and record keeping, and legislative and policy constraints that require our intervention. We are all aware that this data management challenge within and across key departments and state entities still remains. Despite this, the EITI reports have set the basis for the government to address some of these challenges going forward, not only for transparency purposes, but also the accountability of how resource revenues are being used to support our national development agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to challenge the multi-stakeholder group to continue to enhance their participation, not only in implementing the EIT principles to meet the international requirements, but also as key proponents for disseminating well-informed data and to advise the government on some of the critical economic challenges confronting this country and how these can be addressed. This is one of the points that I've been making through to Lucas in terms of a deeper insight and analysis of this data, and to try and assist us to explain some of the things that are happening that I've been mentioning on several occasions in relation to the benefits from these resource projects and why we've seen the phenomenon of declining revenue from these projects. Despite significant activity, unfortunately, into central budget, there has been an undeniable reduction in these revenue flows, and the obvious point I've been making is that despite a significant current account surplus, we have revenue difficulties and we have foreign exchange difficulties on a relatively sustained basis. And so some of the information that we glean through these sorts of reports should also trigger the analysis and the insight and the explanations back to government as to the reasoning behind how some of these things happen. So it's not just a matter of looking at the quantum of the flows, regardless of the high or low quantum. It's looking at that flow and the reasons behind why perhaps it goes up and down, and a deeper analysis of that is what I've been saying, particularly to Treasury, and some of that analysis is being done now. But if some of this information and some of this scrutiny is happening through exercises like the EITI, we can ask some of these higher level questions as well, in terms of that transparency process. And of course, that's part of the point being made here. With these challenges, our government, of course, is tasked with initiating stringent strategies and measures aimed at maintaining fiscal discipline and boosting foreign exchange, revenue growth, strengthening and diversifying our economic base, and improved governance. And these are obviously the broader task at hand. And yesterday, as I received the 20 million kina dividend from National Fishing Authority, we had a good conversation about how the production, the onshore production in the first 3 months of this year is beginning to improve from the data from National Fishing Authority after the removal of the discounting on access to the vessel day scheme days, and we've replaced it with a rebate, onshore rebate that you can earn based on actual production, not some theoretical production or because you put a factory onshore, but then you subsequently, after getting PNG flagged and accessing discount to fishing days, you take the fish away. This way you don't get a discount, rather you get a rebate when you actually produce onshore. And that is already having an impact. And it's part of this, again, this effort. What are the resources? Better utilization of the resources. Making sure that if they are a basis for things like food production, let's bring them onshore and relieve and feed our people and produce the jobs. And so there's a broader initiative underway, and some of the good conversations we've been having with some of our agriculture partners that I think in the summit next week in Leh, we get some of the people like Mainland Holdings and the LR Group and so on, True Guide, some of the initiatives that we are doing to rice production, the stock feed production, grain production, and then you combine it with the issues around the refining of fuel, generating our own energy, the initiative Oil Search Exxon to utilize some of the local gas for local domestic market obligation, the POM gas power plant. I just say these things because it is reflecting the broader effort in terms of how we utilize some of these revenue streams, but the government's general intention and focus is building that broader based economy. So there isn't all this emphasis all the time on the resource sector. And when there is an event like the earthquake, we are so exposed to individual projects because we rely so heavily on them. And so those broader issues, while at the same time scrutinizing and getting maximum benefit from these projects, of course, in a win-win situation for all parties. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to admit that there's much work still to be done, despite the progress we have made in implementing the recommendations from the earlier EIT reports we publish. Therefore, I challenge the various reporting entities engaged within the EITI process to seriously take on board the recommendations made in the previous and current EIT reports and implement these recommendations as mandated implementing agencies to bring about the much needed reforms for better management of the sector. Now, we need to examine that particular point because I think, as explained in the report, it may be necessary to bring some legislative changes in terms of this reporting requirements. And that brings me to the point that through the IRC, of course, in the recent budget, the 2018 budget, we brought in those provisions to remove the secrecy provisions in the Income Tax Act to enable the Secretariat and this process to access and not necessarily be restrained by the secrecy provisions of the Income Tax Act in relation to income tax returns. So that is a legislative intervention, but it may be necessary, to bring further amendments to compel agencies to meet these reporting requirements. Otherwise, we will continue to say, I encourage government agencies to fulfill their requirements when they don't necessarily are compelled to for various reasons. But nevertheless, the government is committed to promoting transparency and accountability, and we will, of course, continue to support the EIT process. The work of the EITI complements the PNG Sovereign Wealth Fund and other reforms like the Independent Commission Against Corruption to address corruption and improve Papua New Guinea's current ranking on the Corruption Perception Index. It also supports the Open Budget Initiative under the Open Government Partnership. Again, these two recent activities that the reports were launched and we attended. And most importantly, it complements existing government development plans and visions aimed at translating resource wealth into broad-based economic growth, especially developing the non-mineral sector of the economy. I want to just note and acknowledge the delay in the Sovereign Wealth Fund implementation, and to say that we're taking steps to get that board in place. And I think you can imagine, given the current economic circumstances, how government tends not necessarily to be giving it the highest priority, because quite frankly, there wouldn't necessarily be the revenue flows into the fund. So it's a challenge in that sense, but it remains a very important element going forward in terms of the sustainable and responsible economy we're trying to build. And of course, I can give you another whole lecture on the STARS program that I had when I was planning minister, which continues to be very important in terms of the longer term picture. So I'll wrap it up. I want to congratulate the multi-stakeholder group again for a job well done in delivering these reports. And I want to also acknowledge the government entities and companies that have participated in the reporting process, and encourage you all to continue the good work. And so Lucas and team, ladies and gentlemen, as the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister for Treasury and Chair of the Papua New Guinea EITI Multi-Stakeholder Group, all these mouthfuls as Laurie says, I now officially launch the Papua New Guinea Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative country reports for the financial years 2015 and 2016. Thank you very much.